So I've been asked today to talk about the development of stewardship in 3 different parishes. And so I want to start with this quote by Pope Francis from The Joy of the Gospel, which I think is an important one for us to consider as we begin this conversation of stewardship development. In the 28th paragraph of The Joy of the Gospel, he said, "The parish is not an outdated institution precisely because it possesses great flexibility. It can assume quite different contours depending on the openness and the missionary creativity of the pastor in the community." It's an important quote for us to consider. Because I dare say, as some of you are sitting in these seats today and are thinking about what you're going to do when you go home, your parishes are at all different places on this stewardship journey. Some of you may be starting the stewardship process for the first time. You're thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? How are we going to launch? Some of you have been doing stewardship for a while and you're thriving and doing great. And some of you may have been doing stewardship for many years and stewardship has gotten a little bit tired and needs a little boost or rejuvenation in your parish. And I think this quote from the Holy Father gives us hope because it reminds us that the parish is not an outdated institution because we possess, by the power and the working of the Holy Spirit, the ability to adapt, the ability to change, the ability to be renewed, the ability to assess, the ability to respond, the ability to continue to draw the people of God into the mystery of faith, ultimately to form disciples of Jesus Christ. And as disciples of Jesus Christ, we respond with a stewardship way of life. And so as we begin this conversation today and you're thinking, where are you in your own journey of stewardship as a person? And where are you in your own journey of stewardship as a parish community? And be reminded that as you call upon the Holy Spirit, you and your parish have a new hope and possibility because the parish is not outdated. It continues to be a place where the community gathers to be nourished and strengthened. So I've had the opportunity in my priesthood to serve at several parishes. My first assignment was at the Church of St. Mary in Tulsa. It was a parish of 1,300 households, a school with 160 students, 4 masses a weekend, 2 daily masses, 2 hours of confession each week, no scheduled adoration time, 6 ministries listed in the ministry book, and around a $24,000 a weekend collection. St. Mary's had been doing stewardship for quite some time, and as I mentioned in my opening comments, I would say they were at that place of stewardship had been a part of their lives, but it had become somewhat tired. The message of stewardship had been presented in a variety of ways, and at times it kind of crept into an understanding of money to the detriment of the other 2 T's of prayer and involvement in parish ministries. As you can see from the weekend collection of 1,300 families, not a bad cash flow. A lot of pastors look at that and they salivate at the opportunity of having $24,000 a weekend to run their parishes. So St. Mary's had a lot going on, but it needed kind of a renewal, a refresher. My second parish, and I was only here for a short time, but some of the levers that we pulled in those months actually set the trajectory for St. Pius to kind of relaunch into a stewardship direction. St. Pius, 950 families, 320 students, 4 masses, 1 daily mass, an hour of adoration each week, 2 hours of confession, 40 ministries listed on the book, and about $12,000 a weekend in collections. Stewardship really had never been executed in a systematic way at this parish. They had a stewardship council, but that council oftentimes met resistance as it related to upper leadership in the parish, be it the pastor or the deacons, and actually implementing stewardship as a way of life into the fabric of the community. And so in this particular situation, you had a strong group of lay parishioners who had a passion for stewardship, but because there was a block kind of in the upper levels of leadership of that parish, not a whole lot actually advanced or moved forward. And then my last assignment, which I would say is still very near and dear to my heart. I've only been out of this parish for about 2 months. When I arrived at St. Anne's, it had 650 households at a regional school on the campus with 340 students, 3 masses a weekend, 1 daily mass, 3.5 hours of confession each week, 2 hours of adoration each week, 48 ministries listed on the book, and about a $6,000 to $7,000 a weekend collection. St. Anne's, I would say, is the little engine that could, right? It was packed full of potential, amazing people who had weathered the storm over many years of pastors kind of coming and going. I followed a pastor who discontinued active ministry from the priesthood, and there was a lot of woundedness that was there. And out of their mouths, they would say, we've always been the black sheep of the diocese. But a good group of individuals who in many ways exhibited, by the way they lived their lives and their fidelity to the parish, what stewardship really was. But stewardship had never been introduced or developed in this parish at all. So, a few notes then. Although different in size and different in location, all three parishes have similar blessings. They had positive weekend liturgies. For the most part, they had stable, dedicated parishioners who have strong parish identity. Although at varying degrees, a working understanding of stewardship. The third parish I was talking about, I would say it was in their blood, but they didn't have necessarily a term for it. A wide range of ministry opportunities. They were on the books, but I would say not always developed. And stable collections and a healthy contingency reserve. None of these places that I was at was kind of at the edge of death. They all had enough money to kind of keep the lights on, enough money to kind of fix a pothole or two there, enough money to fix the roof that was leaking. So 3 parishes, 3 blessings, but also areas of opportunity. So although different in size and different in location, all 3 parishes have opportunities for growth. Improving the hospitality and the availability of prayer liturgies. This was huge. I love this kind of this image that's out there, and I think is sometimes told in the retreats that Catholic Stewardship Consultants facilitates in the parish. It uses that image of the lighthouse on the coast. Where at one time they were going out and making heroic rescues, but as time went on, they kind of started just taking care of themselves, hunkering down and kind of being navel gazers, and they quit going out and doing rescues, but they kind of cared only for themselves. And I would say all 3 parishes on some level had arrived at a place of kind of self-preservation, kind of an internal reflection on kind of what we need versus an open-armed approach for those who come in a sense of hospitality and welcome to those who came through the door. And I'm not just talking about at Mass. I'm also talking about the experience that one would have when they would go into the ministries of the parish. Because it's one thing to kind of print this ministry book and say, oh, look, we've got 60 ministries we're offering here at the parish. But if your ministries are cesspools, who wants to go and be a part of that ministry? If your ministries are places where little cliques exist, who wants to be a part of that ministry? If a ministry is about the self-preservation of the 3 or 4 people that have been in that ministry for the last 40 years, who wants to be a part of that ministry? So when we talk about hospitality as it relates to stewardship, it's not just having vibrant, hospitable liturgies on the weekend. It's how does hospitality imbue the culture of the parish? In everything that you do, hospitality has to be at the forefront. Increasing the number of dedicated parishioners who have a strong parish identity. Parish identity is huge because people anymore, especially living in the day and age, if they don't like something, they're going to walk. If they don't like what you're doing, they don't like the pastor, they don't like the preaching, they don't like the music. We live kind of in a drive-through church mentality today. I'm going to move on and find kind of what I'm looking for somewhere else. Versus people seeing their discipleship and their relationship with Jesus as an integrally connected web between the people who are sitting next to them in the pews, as well as the pastor, as well as the activity of that parish. Developing a spirituality of stewardship is pretty straightforward. There are so many wonky understandings of what stewardship is. Offering a vibrant and engaging ministry opportunities that form people as disciples, and financial transparency and stability. I'm going to get more in depth into these as we go through this presentation. So the pitfalls that we have discovered as we implemented this way of life in these 3 parishes. So the pitfalls: developing stewardship as a way of life, striving to facilitate stewardship as a way of life without a larger vision, I think is oftentimes a pitfall that we fall into when we kind of go at bringing the stewardship into a parish community. What do I mean by this? If there's not a mutually shared vision of stewardship by the pastor, by the stewardship council, by the ministry leaders, by the principal, by other individuals who carry and execute leadership on behalf of the parish, if there's not a mutually shared vision of how stewardship fits into a larger plan, what oftentimes begins to happen is that we say we want to be a stewardship parish, stewardship as a way of life, but behind that oftentimes is a desire to have an offertory increase, if we're honest. Versus, how do we let the stewardship way of life, stewardship as a disciple's response, inform all of the activity of the parish? Otherwise, we slip into the path of least resistance of kind of doing this stewardship thing because our pots are low on money. Believing stewardship is about numbers, ministries, hours of service, collection versus the invitation to discipleship. I think sometimes when priests get together, we're men, right? And we're competitive. How many people do you have in RCA this year? I've got 30. Well, I've got 40. How many ministries do you have active at your parish? I've got 35. Well, I've got 60. We can kind of play the numbers game, right? When we think about stewardship as a way of life, we're not trying to create something that's flashy so that we can say, oh, look how good we are. But the stewardship as a way of life is really meant, again, to create intentional niches within our community where disciples are formed. Creating intentional places where people can gather together to encounter the Lord, whether that's in the liturgy, whether that's in small Bible studies, whether that's in service. But the ministries we have in our books, the things that we do in the parish, have to be oriented towards the purpose of the parish, which is the formation of disciples. And so sometimes we can get caught up in this mindset that more is better. When I would say in the stewardship way of life, quality is better. More is not better. Quality is better. Making sure that you have the right ministries for the people that you're serving today in that community, versus just wanting to pad our ministry books with all kinds of things that really aren't active, that really are not serving that purpose. Pay attention to all three T's of stewardship: time, prayer, talent, involvement, and treasure, which is people's financial giving. There was a priest that formed me in the seminary, and it's not this one sitting up here in the front. He was much better than Father Godfrey. Who, in our deacon year, stood behind the ambo and grabbed it, and he says, "Now, gentlemen," he said, "beware." He said, "The people of God have a bullshit detector. It comes with baptism." Right? That applies to stewardship in such a profound way. The people of God will sniff you out. The people of God will call you on the carpet if you say we are a stewardship parish and you don't give equal attention to all three T's. When we think about stewardship, time, talent, and treasure, when we're developing ministry opportunities, when we're developing this as a way of life, are we being intentional in teaching people how to pray? Are we being intentional in creating opportunities for people to come together both in public and in private forms and expressions of prayer? When it comes to the talent, are we creating meaningful and welcoming ministries, again, that can connect to their everyday life and bring them into a sense of authentic community? And as it relates to treasure, are we being transparent on how we're using their hard-earned money to advance the parish? Or do they see this money that is being spent on frivolous things that is not being connected to the larger ministry of the parish? People are super sensitive right now, as they should be, to what is going on in our communities. People are hungry for authenticity. And when we're bringing stewardship as a way of life into our communities, we have to be intentional about all three T's: time, talent, and treasure. And I would always say, if we do the first two well, the third T will take care of itself. And that's been my experience at all three parishes. I personally have a hard time preaching about money. And if you sit in my pew, you would probably very rarely hear me talk about it unless I'm kind of incorporating it in the stewardship renewal, or maybe once or twice during the year. But I stand on the conviction that if you feed your people spiritually, if you bring them into a relationship with Jesus Christ, if you help them have intentional and authentic community, they get it. They want to fund the mission. They want to put money into this place that's helping them grow in their relationship with Christ and with one another, and the treasure will flow in at a rate that you will never have to worry about money again. Another pitfall is not focusing on the faith formation. We're called to be individuals who are on this journey of ongoing formations, this journey of ongoing conversion. Put a lot of stock in faith formation. A lot of stock in investing in employees, investing in volunteers who can give a solid faith formation opportunity, because as people are formed in the faith, as they understand their call as a disciple, again, we call stewardship as disciples' response. That formation is essential, not just in stewardship, but in discipleship. And as we form the hearts of our people as those who want to walk in the footsteps of the Master, stewardship is a logical next step for them in their journey. Another pitfall, allowing parish staff and key volunteers to stay in roles of leadership when they are no longer effective. I heard a mm-hmm. The church struggles with this, right? The church struggles in the development of staff. The church struggles in development of volunteers. The church struggles in having a difficult conversation with someone to let them know that their services or their leadership would be better used somewhere else. And because we're afraid of hurting people's feelings. And that's a noble feeling, right? We don't want to ruffle people's feathers. We don't want to hurt somebody because, Susie Q has given the last 45 of her years to the Altar Guild. But now she no longer has the capacity to lead that ministry at the level that it needs to be led. So how do you have conversations with that person to help them find another place to use their gifts and talents and abilities? And the same thing happens with our staff, right? Again, unless our staff are constantly being renewed and staying relevant and developing themselves, sometimes it's needed to kind of realign our parishes, our staffs, to be mission-oriented. And so at times, hard conversations have to happen. But I can tell you, leaving an ineffective person or a person who is exclusive in roles of leadership is one of the number one ways that you will shut down any sort of forward progress in developing this as a way of life in our communities. So what value do you need to develop within yourself to have those difficult conversations, a value that is connected, yes, to treating that person with dignity and respect in front of you, but a value that is connected to the formation and the vitality of the larger parish community that affects the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people by the way our leadership decisions and techniques are carried out. Yes? Oh, that's a good question. It is a series of conversations. And so it's a matter of, I'm going to get to this in a minute. We do a yearly evaluation of our ministries, asking people to kind of give feedback on their experience. And I would use that information to have a conversation with that volunteer about why this feedback was coming, or why they were the only ministry that was not able to actually incorporate new recruits, why they're always the one that keeps getting smaller. And through that conversation, you oftentimes will pop up, out of that conversation, kind of where they're feeling insecure or deficient. And so then it's a matter of how do you help them grow there, or how do you help them figure out another place to use their gifts and talents. But you use kind of the active feedback of the community to help guide that conversation to get you to that place of action of, is it more formation for that person, or is it actually using their gifts and talents in a different place? But I utilized an evaluation form on an annual basis for that ministry. Not easy conversations, but worthy conversations, sacred conversations for the sake of the whole. All right. Pastor-driven versus stewardship council supported, or vice versa. There has to be a united front between the pastor and the stewardship council and the pastor. Otherwise, we find ourselves working against each other. And I've seen that happen in different parishes that I've been involved in my work with Catholic stewardship consultants. I get pulled aside by the stewardship council and say, could you please talk to Father while you're here? Or I get pulled aside by Father, and Father says, gosh, there's a lot of resistance to this. Make sure that you hit this point, and this point while you're giving the retreat or you're giving the talk. Really striving to be united between the pastor as well as the stewardship councils in our parishes, because when there's that unity and that synergy, the ability to move stewardship as a way of life forward really is a beautiful thing. Allowing ministries to exist that are not opening and welcoming to new members. This is a huge pitfall. I experienced this my first year at St. Anne's when we did our first stewardship renewal. I'd been there 6 months, and we put our ministry book together, and we had like 48 ministries that we represented. I had not been there long enough to really understand who was who in the community. We did the renewal. We had a profound response, and it came time for the follow-up, and I started getting phone calls from the ministry leaders saying, I don't need anybody else. We've got what we need. Father, what am I going to do with these people? I'm like, I didn't anticipate that. You're going to call them, and you're going to welcome them into your ministry, right? And so that then kind of put me on this trajectory of kind of what I was saying. I have to evaluate whether this ministry actually is able and open to receiving new ministry recruits. And if they're not, I have to have a conversation with them. And if they're still resistant after the conversation, obviously I can't make that group stop meeting, but I can sure as heck pull their ministry out of the ministry book and not advertise them again in the future. And that was the response, with 1 or 2 at the very beginning. And then again, it set the tone of, this is where we're going. I would have conversations with them. We would work on kind of improving. We would work on development. And oftentimes that worked. And then once they had the experience of new recruits in their ministry, like, this is great. We don't have to do all the work anymore. Oh, this is great. This person had an unbelievable idea on how to execute on this particular parish function that I never thought about. They started to seeing the gift and beauty of that diversity coming in through those renewals. And again, and those who chose to be closed chose to die. And it was okay. They moved on. It was their time, 30 years ago, but in the moment it wasn't. Allowing particular ownership of ministries, not seeking help from the outside the parish, and believing it is finished. That whole ownership thing, again, is kind of what I've been talking about, and just be aware of that as a pitfall as you strive to implement stewardship as a way of life in your parish. It's not John's ministry. It's not Sue's ministry. It is a ministry of the parish that is being stewarded by John or Sue. They don't own it. And again, as we form people in the spirituality of stewardship, that's a huge place to put emphasis. This is corporately ours. And when you are doing great ministry in your ministry, and when you're doing great ministry in your ministry, together we're better. And so really to facilitate this spirit of openness and collaboration versus particular ownership of the ministry that they are involved in. And that last point is really an important one, believing that it is finished. It's never finished. Just when you think that you're coasting, stewardship is a way of life, we're gung-ho, we're doing well, don't let off the gas pedal. But keep messaging, keep preaching, keep envisioning, keep moving forward, keep kind of looking for ways that you can be even more authentically in line with the vision and mission of stewardship. This line from Proverbs is, I think, a beautiful one. I like to play with it. Proverbs 29:18, it says, where there is no vision, a people perish, P-E-R-I-S-H. But where there is a vision, a people perish, P-A-R-I-S-H. And this idea that it is never done, and as we promote stewardship as a way of life, as we promote stewardship really as who we are as a parish community, we won't perish, P-E-R-I-S-H. But we will perish, P-A-R-I-S-H, because when we're being intentional about kind of our vision and the direction of our parish as being rooted in an authentic stewardship way of life, we're being intentional to those areas that we know have a direct effect on one's own spiritual growth in connection to our parishes. So a few other milestones. Laity, as you start moving into integrating this as your way of life, some of the things that we saw and I think that you will see and you probably have already seen in your own ministries. The laity and the parish staff begin to understand the mission of the parish, which is to make disciples. My first year at St. Mary's, after I finished, I was about 9 months in as a new priest. And again, we had 60-some ministries on the book. And there were a lot of ministries that just had a lot of activity. I remember laying in bed one morning and before I got up and thought, like, I can't do this another day. I feel like the activities director on a cruise ship. You know? I'm running to the next thing and 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 the next thing. And like, what difference is this making? You know, in the lives of our people as it relates to their walk with Christ? What difference is this busyness making in this truly being a vibrant parish community? What difference is all of this activity making in my own spiritual life as a priest? So the more we understand the gift and beauty of stewardship as making disciples, that mindset kind of starts imbuing the mindset of your ministry leaders and of your parish staff, and we become more intentional about how we use our time, how we use our resources, how we use our space. You know, who we rent the gym out to. All of those things really begin kind of falling into place of what are we about? What is our ministry? What's our direction? The overall environment of the parish takes on an air of hospitality and welcome, not just at Mass, but in all aspects of parish life. We instituted the greeter and the usher ministry at St. Anne's. We had some ushers that have been there since the founding of the parish and really had no new recruits. And we recruited a whole new band of ushers who took care of hospitality inside the church. And then we recruited a whole group of greeters at weekend masses that took care of we built an L kind of gathering space, vestibule around the outside. And I said, it is my goal that a person, when they arrive for Mass, have contact with 3 people who greet them before they ever sit down in the pew. That was my goal. That was the rallying cry among the greeters and the ushers. 3 points of contact before they sit down. And I'll tell you, it changed the culture of weekend Mass. People will show up for the first time to coming to St. Anne's, like, something's different here. This place is alive. You can feel it. It was palpable. Because the people of God took it on themselves as their ministry to be ambassadors of hospitality. You know, something else I got made fun of a lot, but when it came to coffee and donuts after Mass, we were buying at Sam's huge vats of Folgers coffee that were probably ground 3 years ago and have been sitting in a hot warehouse, you know, waiting to come to coffee and donuts at St. Anne's. And I said, if we're trying to reach the young people, which we are, in a particular way, because there was a gap of young people at our parish, you know, they belong kind of to this coffee culture today. And so they're dropping their kids off at Faith Formation, they're driving to Starbucks and getting their coffee and sitting in the parking lot talking to each other. I said, why don't we offer good coffee? So I went and I talked to a local roaster in the city and I said, we're going to start buying your beans. We changed out all of our coffee pots, all of our grinders. We created a coffee bar area and actually have probably the best coffee in all the churches in the area. And we spend money on it. And at first, the secretary and the bookkeeper were like, Father, we're spending a lot of money on coffee every month. I said, but do you see the number of people that are staying for coffee and donuts now? And even my little old parishioner would say, there's something different about this coffee. That's right, there is something different about this coffee. But in my mind, it was an act of hospitality. Spending that money on that good coffee, you know, kind of instigated people staying because they felt that I was making an investment in something of quality that I wanted to offer them. And they stayed. And as they have stayed, this whole new sense of community among young adults began to form in the parish. But it was a leadership response of coffee. But it was connected into stewardship to a spirit of hospitality that I want to show that you are not cheap. Our relationship is not cheap. That I want to invest in you. And that was a love language for those young people, that coffee was it. Parishioners take new steps in getting involved, which in turn helps them grow as disciples of Jesus Christ. And I call this kind of, I think the church has used this language before, it's the missionary impulse. That once it gets going, once people catch it, once people understand it, you can't stop them, in the best sense of the word. They get a taste for what prayer is like. They get a taste for what ministry is like, service is like, and they keep showing up. There was actually a gentleman, his name is Tom, and Tom runs our home improvement ministry that we started. Again, it's a group of men and women who gather once a quarter, and they go out and change light bulbs, weed flower beds, fix handicap ramps for our parishioners who can't do it on their own. And Tom would come to me just sweaty and gross after the workday, and he's like, Father, I just can't thank you enough, for letting me do this work. I'm like, you're gross right now, dude. He's like, I love it. He said, when can we do a next one? I'm like, Tom, I said, you just spent like hours this week buying supplies and organizing this and bringing volunteers together, and you're a hot mess right now. I said, you're already talking about the next service day. He said, because I can't get enough. I can't get enough. And Tom really has now influenced that whole community of the home improvement ministry of having a heart for service, realizing they have something to give. Whether it's swinging a hammer, whether it's moving mulch, but it's care for our community. That missionary impulse catches on. Healthy parish ownership, people start identifying with their brothers and sisters. They start identifying with the parish. Those seeking adoration, confession, and personal prayer time increases. Our daily Mass numbers have increased, doubled in the last 4 years at St. Anne's in particular. And we were able to move over a Lenten period of time. I challenged people to sign up for an hour of confession. And during Lent, we went from having 2.5 hours of confession a week to having confession Monday through Friday, 9 to 9. Boom. But again, it came after 2 years of preaching, time, talent, and treasure. Stewardship is a disciple's response. Prayer is the pillar of this way of life. And when I challenged them to be more intentional about that, they took it. During Lent, we signed up, we launched it on Easter Monday, and it's been going now for 2 years without a hitch. The parish offertory grows as a result of personal discipleship. It automatically comes our way. And so what does this parish look like today? St. Anne's has had a profound renewal. Yes, the area around us is an area that's a vibrant part of our community. I just talked to the parish secretary. So this was the 2017 renewal results. They just gave out the envelope for the 1,000th family. So starting in 2013, when I got there, we had 650 households. They're now at 1,000 households. And these are people, again, who are coming in from other parts of the city because they're finding at St. Anne's an authentic place of encounter and worship. They're being fed in their prayer. They're being fed in their parish involvement. And they're obviously very generous with their treasure. Of those 900 households in 2017, we had 359 households make commitments through the annual stewardship renewal. That has grown incrementally over the last 4 years. The first year we had 200 and some, and it just has continued to go up over and over again because we have not let off the gas pedal of pushing this as a way of life, encouraging people to make those concrete commitments. And I would say that it's at the heart of building a stewardship parish. You have to have ways for people to write their commitment down. Otherwise, a good intention is just a good intention. And there's something about the ritual of writing it down and turning it in and being followed up with and being pursued and being wanted and being brought in that has a direct effect on people's buy-in to this as a way of life. What I'm most proud of are the numbers of the prayer commitments. Of those 359 households, which could range from 1 to 5 or 6 people in a household, we had 1,833 prayer commitments to an hour of adoration or to coming to daily Mass or coming to Sunday Mass every week, praying a rosary, going to confession, inviting them to make those concrete commitments in their prayer life. 1,595 ministry commitments, 591 of which were new commitments in this 1 year. Again, that's connected to the hard work that went into the evaluation of our ministries and making sure that they were places of hospitality and making sure those ministries had a purpose and making sure that those ministries were a place where people could actually do what the ministry book said they would do. It took us a little while to get ourselves to that place, but I would say St. Anne's is doing really well at making sure those ministries are relevant. This next point I think is an interesting one. 61 inactive households made a commitment for the first time. In other words, people who had been in the parish, over the time that we've been doing stewardship, 61 households decided for the first time, hey, I'm going to throw my hat in the game. I'm going to make some sort of next step in my discipleship that I maybe never have made before. And what's interesting about that number is that it shows that we actually can move those bumps on a log in our pews. Those people that I sometimes say just kind of take up pew estate. They come and they're consumers and they leave. And we can get frustrated at them sometimes. They're doing nothing kind of in return for what they're getting. But don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. Continue to preach, continue to invite, continue to encourage. And in this particular year, 61 of those households decided to participate formally in our annual renewal. 285 offertory commitments were made. And of those 285, compared to what they gave the previous year, we had an offertory increase of $220,000 for that fiscal year. So, our weekly collections now at St. Anne's are coming in at $18,000 a weekend. So we've seen the parish go from 650 households to about 1,000, $6,000 to $7,000 a weekend to $18,000 a weekend over about a 4.5-year period. But I would say that number is there because of everything else that's above that number, of the intentionality that was put into really rooting ourselves in this way of life. But if I can show you my greatest pride and joy of the fruits of stewardship as a way of life in a parish, is this picture. Last Easter, we had the privilege of fully initiating 56 individuals into full communion with the Catholic Church. And I think this number of individuals who came into the church at Easter is a testament to that missionary impulse that exists in the life of our community. And I would say that missionary impulse exists in the life of the community that went out and got these people, their brothers and their sisters, their co-workers, the non-Catholics in our school. I didn't do that. It was the people of God who were filled with passion and zeal that went out and said, come and see. Come and see what's going on. But that missionary impulse was fed through the intentionality of striving to create stewardship as a way of life in our parish, letting it imbue the fabric of who we are. And again, people have a sense of authenticity, and people are hungry for authentic community today in the life of the church. And so in conclusion, what I would say, stewardship is not a program, it's not a gimmick, and it's not a quick solution. It's not. So if there's kind of a one-off thing that you kind of want to get done, by trying to kind of implement stewardship as a way of life in your parish, don't lie to your people. Don't do it. Because it's not a program, it's not a gimmick, it's not a quick solution. And it will do more harm than good if you try to promote it and don't execute on it in its totality. Because stewardship is a way of life. It is a way to build community. It is a way to form disciples for Jesus Christ. And as the USCCB has so beautifully phrased it, stewardship is a disciple's response. Stewardship is the response of one who has encountered the Lord and who says, Master, to whom else do we go? You have the words of everlasting life. And they place themselves in the service of the church. They place themselves in the service of one another. They place themselves in the service of their husbands, of their wives, of their children. They place themselves in service to their larger civic community. They see that their life, everything that they have and own, is unmerited gift that they want to give away. Like Tom, who couldn't wait to get his hands dirty again by serving his brothers and sisters who are in need. That's it.